and he is going to, well, I like this sign. You're the only one who's got the most fantastic first slide. So you introduce your topic, Shahar. Let's give it up for VMware.
Thank you very much. My name is Shahar Erez. I drive the application management product strategy at VMware. And I'm going to spend the next 30-35 minutes kind of talking how to evolve your cloud strategy from focusing on setting up infrastructure to actually evolve it to running business services on top of that cloud. Well, we've all seen significant rate of innovation growing in the recent years, mostly driven by software. We know software is driving innovation today. Pretty much every type of innovation we're exposed to, definitely the audience here, has to do something with software. We see that for software companies, enterprise vendors, and definitely web companies. But what's fundamentally changed over the last 7+ years is actually that software is now moving away from just the pure software companies into other regions as well. You might have seen this piece by Mark Andreessen. It's actually already a year old. Mark Andreessen, a great innovator, the first one to build the web browser, first cloud, and now investing in plenty of new emerging startup companies, had the claim that every company in any industry today is actually a software company. Whether you're an automobile, pharmaceutical, telecommunication, healthcare, you are a software company. Software is what's driving your business. Software is what gives you the edge. And software is what's going to help you grow your business. If you're not investing in software, if you're not differentiating through software, you actually slowly will move out of business. And the software that Mark Andreessen is talking about in this piece is actually not the software that we think about on a day-to-day basis. We're all exposed to the web companies, which we know is software companies, but it's actually the software that delivers packages, that renders movies, that streams music, that visualizes X-rays or MRIs. There's a lot of different software types that we're seeing coming out of these companies. And if you look at the economical graveyard, if you will, of companies, there's a lot of companies that went out of business as they were not able to evolve or leverage software in their advantage. We all know that Borders went out of business pretty much because Amazon was able to leverage software to recommend new books for others to read, and over time stream those books down to your mobile devices. Most recently, Blockbuster going out of business because Netflix built software that helped recommend videos and eventually stream those videos down to your homes. And Blockbuster for years was the Goliath of home entertainment. And when our kids grow up, they'll never hear of what Blockbuster was. It was a had-been company. So if software is driving up the business and software is driving innovation, let's have a reality check. Is IT today really up to cope with the pace of innovation and stand up to the challenge? When we meet IT executives, we ask them how much you're investing in innovation. How important is innovation to your business today? And the reality is everybody recognizes that if they're not able to innovate, they're going to go out of business. But the overwhelming number is that pretty much every single IT executive we speak to realizes that his own organization is not doing well in the front of innovation. They're captivated by maintaining their system, maintaining what works today, and they don't have the bandwidth to actually go beyond and innovate and deliver the business growth. And that business growth is no longer expected just by IT, but by the line of business themselves. A decade ago, IT was a business enabler. Yes, it supported the business. Today, IT is the business. If IT is not able to stand up to the challenge, the business will slowly go out of, well, business. This is something that appeared in the paper earlier this summer, actually. It's a quote by Gartner. And Gartner estimates that by 2017, that marketing teams in your organization will be spending more on IT than the CIO. Scary thought. IT is losing control. The marketing teams understand that they need to grow the business, but however, they understand that IT is not the one to help them grow. They need to go out. They're starting to build shadow IT or acquiring their own services to keep growing because IT is simply moving too slow. It's captivated in doing the same things again and again, not able to accelerate the growth that the business needs. At VMware, we kind of look at the transformation required to achieve this innovation or the pace of innovation in kind of a top-to-bottom transformation for IT. And that transformation needs to happen in three main layers. First one is the infrastructure. And we started this journey with virtualization. This is really the journey from moving from virtualization to cloud. It's mostly about integration of automation of your data center to allow that pace of innovation. On the application front, there's a need to replace some of the existing tools that are used, because the users that are accessing the data and the data fabrics that they're accessing now is fundamentally different, and so you need different set of technologies to enable that. The third layer is really around how users access information today. And this is a fundamental change. We just heard Akamai talking about mobile devices. And I think this is a fundamental change that we've all been feeling for the last couple of years, moving from smartphones to tablets and the whole mobile revolution. We all realize that the post-PC era is coming. None of us are really sure yet how it's gonna be, but we all know that in 5 years we'll be interacting with media and data fabrics much more from various mobile devices, from various spots, and not through our desktops or laptops. So I think this is a very exciting area. I'm going to focus today's discussion mostly around how to transform your infrastructure and business delivery layers. So this is kind of an eye candy, aimed to semi-confuse you. But when you think of really how IT operates and what IT delivers today, IT is very much siloed, very much fragmented across multiple domains, multiple functions. And as you want to deliver a business service, well, you need to go through these various boxes, starting from the physical infrastructure, delivering the switches, the routers, storage arrays, disks, moving up to a layer of virtualization, placing operating systems above, whether it's Windows or Unix or Linux, whether it's a web sphere, or all these components that you need to set up together in order to get your business service. You know what it takes even better than I do. You do this on a day-to-day basis. Actually getting a business service up and running is very, very complicated. When I present this slide to IT executive, they kind of take a step back and realize, wow, managing this fabric is really, really hard. It's really complicated. Each of these boxes are managed by different teams. They're managed by different groups with different naming conventions, with different cycles, from different vendors. And then you need to set everything up together and connect, create these dependencies, and get all these life cycles interconnected. But that's really how you're seeing the business service. This is how you're connecting. This is what you need to get the business service up and running. This is not how the business service actually runs, because when you get the system up and running, you're connecting it to multiple other systems. And so when you're actually trying to realize how everything works in the system, it's like trying to shoot a business transaction through this fabric, and then everything cascades through these multiple components. It is very, very complex, very, very confusing, and no doubt, very difficult to keep innovating in face of this complexity. What we've seen in recent years is actually something very, very interesting. We've seen a trend where the operating layer, the layer that operates, the software that operates the physical infrastructure, is starting to get separated from the complexities of the infrastructure. When we adopted the notion of hypervisors, whether VMware's or others, we subscribed to a path where we took the operating system with the workload or the application and encapsulated them inside these containers called virtual machines, and then we pushed them away from the infrastructure. And as we push them away from the infrastructure, we got some advantages around savings, CapEx, Opex, and some agility. But in recent years, we're realizing that virtualizing the compute layer was actually the easy part. And now we need to keep virtualizing, and the next path that we need to virtualize is actually around the networks. The networks are complicated. If you want to start taking these packages and move them across, then you're bounded to physical networks, so we need to virtualize or software operate that network. And so the notion of software-defined networks started emerging. It is now growing. Obviously, at VMware, we acquired Nicira, as we believe this is required to achieve a cloud architecture, and next phase is virtualize the storage. So what's really happening now is we're creating what we call the meta operating system, the operating system that operates the cloud. And that meta operating system really maps the requirements of your workload to the cloud resources. Let's go back to assembly class in college or computer science. And if you remember, what an operating system really does is something very, very simple. You take a process or a thread and you map it to compute, CPU, memory, and I/O. That's what the operating system really does. If you think of what this meta operating system will do, it will map your requirements to the infrastructure requirement, compute, storage, network. So if you completely abstracted the complexities of the cloud, of the data center from the business services that run on top, and what you eventually get is this far simpler model where the requirement of the application are abstracted within that container. The unit of management is far more granular, looking at a machine or container that has an operating system and an app within it, and all the complexities of the infrastructure are abstracted or hidden by this operating layer underneath. When you think about this, actually, up until recent years, we looked at the operating system as a platform to push multiple applications on top. We used to push as many apps on top of a single OS, and that had a reason. One of the reasons was saving on software, saving on complexity, saving on the hardware that you bounded it to. But that created a lot of complexity in other areas. All of a sudden, you had library conflicts and time synchronization, not to manage the entire life cycle of each of these apps. Maintenance, patching, config changes, all these dependencies, you just grew them as you started creating these dependencies. Once you create that finer granular unit of management, which is an operating system with a dedicated app that is completely within your control, you can start taking a lot more decisions around how to manage the life cycle of that component without all the complexities of the underlying infrastructure. And so we end up with what we call the software-defined data center. And the software-defined data center is really a concept where we talk about where all the infrastructure is completely virtualized and delivered as a service, and the entire control of the data center is done by software through a set of policies. The software-defined data center really, we're trying to meet a few key characteristics. First of all, it needs to be completely standardized. The entire infrastructure is access to a layer of software. That layer of software is standardizing on homogeneous infrastructure, which is x86, where everyone is moving towards, and reduces significant complexity from other infrastructure. It needs to be completely holistic, so you can run any type of application, any size, any type on that infrastructure. It needs to be completely adaptive. So if you need to scale or programmatically adapt to the requirements of the business, you can do that automatically. You can scale the application up and down. You can ask for resources without being dependent on the underlying infrastructure or physical infrastructure, more like it. Automated, so you place your workloads based on business policies and not based on certain constraints of the infrastructure, unless it's resilient, and I don't think there's a need to explain resiliency. And so we end up with this cloud thing. And at this point in time, I think that every time people start hearing about cloud, eyes roll over. That's cloud thing again. We heard it, we've seen it. There's clouds this, cloud that, cloud conferences probably. And it's really starting to get to people. It sounds like a vendor thing. The vendors came up with another brand just so they can sell more stuff. When I first learned of cloud, I was starting to look at it 4 or 5 years ago. AWS was the first thing I looked at back then. I was like, yeah, interesting. Sounds like adaptive computing or distributed computing. Not much different. Sounds very much like hosting or outsourcing, next generation or something of that sort. Nothing knocked me off my feet. But I was really utterly wrong eventually. As you start looking at cloud, not from the technology standpoint, it might be a distributed technology or distributed computing next generation, but you're starting to realize that cloud is not just about the technology. If you look at it from a technology standpoint, nothing different to an extent. But cloud is really a completely new consumption model for IT. It sets a new expectation from the business, from IT, and how services are delivered. What cloud sets is a reset on how the businesses expect IT to deliver services. We all expect now cloud to provide self-service, infrastructure, platform, software, whatever that may be, self-service something. We expect the services that are delivered by IT, again, infrastructure, platform, apps, software, instantly provisioned, easy to use, pay only when you're using, very efficient cost-wise, and eventually elastic so I can scale and meet my business needs when I need to meet them. So we need to revert our thinking and looking at cloud not just about how we build the cloud, but what cloud and how cloud will impact the business itself. But building a cloud is not enough. And the reason that the cloud is not enough is we talk to customers and consumers of cloud, whether they're using private or public. A lot of them are seeing significant CapEx and Opex saving in adopting virtualization and cloud computing. But they're all saying in parallel, we're still not seeing the business agility, the pace of innovation that we expected to happen as we adopt cloud technology. And the reason most organizations are not seeing it is because they're treating cloud as a technology advancement and not as a radical change to how you operate in face of the cloud era. I'm meeting a lot of customers in my role at VMware, and what I'm seeing is that customers rolling out cloud virtualization, self-service, whatever that may be, and they're still at that point where they're trying to get and squeeze cloud into their current processes or way of thinking. I'm talking to the organization that invested significant amounts of dollars in rolling out cloud technologies, very heavily virtualized, using a lot of open source components. So you expect these organizations to be a lot more agile. And I met a company, a well-known company, a significant website, a lot of the revenue coming from their website. And when we asked them, so when you want to scale out your application, how long does it take you? And the answer was 3 weeks. To add a new virtual machine with Tomcat server in that takes them 3 weeks to roll into production. I was like, I don't get this. You can get a virtual machine in literally 2 or 3 minutes. You can have a Tomcat template. You might need to run some configuration there, but it's very, very easy to get there from a technology standpoint. What's stopping you? And the answer was, well, you know, the way we've been doing things here for the last 10 or 15 years, that every time you want to add something into production, whether it's physical or software, you got to open a ticket, and we'll get back to ticketing system later as well. You open a ticket, the ticket waits, someone needs to hand that ticket over to someone else, it gets to approval, we get the approval, then we get the VM, then someone needs to install the Tomcat, someone needs to configure. 3 weeks later, we scale the app. Maybe it's not relevant anymore, maybe we don't need it anymore, but now we got another Tomcat server. And so we'll never give it back because we might need it again in a month or so. And so in order to really get the agility of the cloud, in order to unlock the value of the cloud, you need to have a much more comprehensive view of how you're meeting the services and how you're delivering the services to really gain the agility that cloud can deliver. And so let's have a check for a second. Why is everybody so consumed by the CapEx or Opex savings that cloud may offer? This is real survey on IT spend. Where is IT spending more so its resources or financials on? And honestly, I don't think this has changed for the last at least 2 decades. And one of the things that we're seeing is that 85% of IT resources are spent on software and labor. Most of the resources are spent on software and labor. We are fixated on the infrastructure layer, but most of the challenge that we have in delivering business services is actually investing human capital and software in delivering these services. And when you try to think why is that the case, well, it takes us back to that slide that we've seen with all these boxes, all the different components that we're seeing there. When you roll out a business service, let me see for a second what you need to do. You either build it or buy that. You need to architect it, design it. You need to integrate it. You need to test it. If you're in a large company with processes, you'll test it again and test it again and again and again. And then you need to deploy that. And then you need to back it up, and then you need to secure that. And you need to do that for every business service. So it's very difficult to get an economy of scale with this is what you need to do and how much money you need to spend on that. And don't forget that each of these processes are managed by different teams with different processes and different KPIs and MBOs. And so when you talk to organizations that run hundreds of apps and large organizations that run thousands of apps, there's no way to get to an economy of scale. We talk about agility and how do you become an agile organization. A lot of organizations you talk to, IT today, will tell you, yeah, we adopted Agile. But they adopted Agile only on the development part. The developers develop very fast, and then it gets stuck, and you never push it into production. When I talk about Agile, it's how to get Agile operation, how to streamline the process from dev all the way to production. And so recent years we're starting to hear Agile Ops, No Ops, DevOps, or different trends. And companies are kind of staring at the headlights, trying to figure out, so how do we get there? But they're still so fixated on this process and the infrastructure. And so we're starting to adopt cloud computing, and companies that we're seeing getting to scale, the one thing that worked for them to get to scale is actually to start generating more standardized application patterns or application topologies. With VMware, call them blueprints. So you define how you want your business service, so what is a defined business service that you want to be able to run. And so the economics completely shift. And you'll be spending a lot more, if you will, ratio-wise, on infrastructure and the other services than on labor and software. Now, this is kind of a confusing slide because people are looking at this saying, wait, eventually I'm spending the same amount. But no, this is percentage. This is not fixed amount. Percentage-wise, you'll be balancing. The overall amount will go significantly down. You'll still be spending the same amount on infrastructure and the rest of the stack, but you'll be spending a lot less on labor and software. So we understand where most of the money is being spent, and we understand what's the challenge, and we understand we can deliver business services from a technology standpoint, but there's a significant operational challenge as well. For those of us who've been in IT for years, those of us who recently joined IT actually, there's an operational model that simply doesn't work in the cloud era. That operational model speaks of a system that we all dread but we all use on a daily basis, and it's called the Helpdesk System or the ticketing system. And everything in an organization revolves around this center of gravity where everyone's communicating through this thing. Just imagine if you had Facebook communicating with one another through ticketing systems. This is how the organizations communicate with one another. If we go back to what it means building a business service, if I had to go to IT to ask for a business service, the thing I would do is open a master ticket. I need a business service. And then I would open a master ticket to each one of the organizational silos. The infrastructure team, the networking team, the application team, the database team, the security team. The security team will say no, doesn't matter what I ask for. And eventually, if all of them agree to that ticket, they will send the ticket to someone, relay that to someone else to actually go and try and do something. Now, each of these teams have different processes, different naming convention, different times to deliver, and eventually they'll reply with tickets that I need to start grouped together in order to get this business service up and running. Pretty complex if you want to be agile, if you want to innovate, talk about discouragement to actually try and do something. And so a decade ago or so, we got introduced to ITIL, and ITIL said, well, the process is complex. So in order to streamline the process, we'll just put some rules on how the process works. We're not going to try and accelerate the process. We're just going to put clear rules on how the process needs to work, and we'll put a run book for everything that you need to do. And the result of this was a very, very slow organization where everything is expensive because you need the experts for everything. Everything is fragile. Everything is dependent. And the organization doesn't want to change. I used to work in IT and operations 15 years ago. I worked for a cellular carrier back then. And I remember my night shifts in the operations center. And we had this theme that we had. If it works, don't touch it. If you touch it, it will break. It's your responsibility. And so we all kind of evolved into this mantra of just keep the lights on. Don't try and change anything. And when you think about it for years, that was what IT is all about. Just keep things stable. But as IT is now the source of growth, it has to change. It has to accelerate innovation and pace of change to deliver more services. Otherwise, the entire business is at stake. The new operational model, and we're seeing it already, we're hearing about it for years, and we're starting to see it trickling into enterprise IT. And that world is where change is constant. No longer change is just required to get to the new steady states and to avoid the next change. But change is something that happens all the time. You change something, but you know it's already going to change again, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week. Not everybody needs to adopt Facebook, Google's, or Flickr's approach with 10 or 20 or 40 changes a day. But your mindset is that the change is only pending until the next change. And change is not just defensive, it's offensive. You're changing to grow. And as change is steady, you need to automate a lot more. You need to automate the processes. You need to automate the patterns you're provisioning. You need to automate the response when something breaks. Otherwise, your organization is not going to be able to evolve and grow in the paces that you need. In order to get to this new operational model, you need to change a few things. Most of the things are around how you manage, how you approach your IT. At VMware, we kind of look at this in 3 core pillars. The first pillar is how you provision, how you treat service provisioning as a whole. Most of service provisioning solutions look at provisioning very much bottom up. You need to provision a machine, you need to provision an OS, you need to provision a middleware stack. In the cloud, in order to innovate in the pace, you need to start looking at provisioning services top down. What is the end state of my business service? I want to declare the end state, and now I will let the tools, the automation figure out where they're getting the resources, what needs to be configured, and all of that will happen in no time. We need to have a model-driven provisioning approach. Provisioning itself needs to be policy-based, not through tickets or anything like that. I need to know what I'm entitled to provision, where I'm entitled to provision to, and then I can quickly go and leverage that self-service. From an operational standpoint, it's no longer suffice to look at metrics, CPU, memory, disk space, set alerts, event deduplication. It simply will not cut it, not in the amount of data that you need to process. You need to be able to look at streams of data, analyze those streams of data, and understand not only what they mean now, not as endpoints of metrics, but actually what is the implication going to be on my business service now, in 10 minutes, or in a day. I need to be able to look not just at performance, but performance, configuration, capacity, security, compliancy, all these come together into one place as you want to operationalize your business services. And eventually you need to start looking at managing your organization, your IT as a business. As you're starting to look at running IT as a business, you need to make sure that A, you're service aware and service level aware. You need to make sure that you're managing the financials of running the business services, whether they're running on your own cloud or within the DMZ, and whether they're backed up. Do you need to back them up? Whether they're running on the public cloud, how much are you actually spending on each business service? There isn't a single organization that I've met when we ask them how much does it cost them to run their Exchange server. None of them are able to answer that today. Not the software or the server that's running on, but end to end, how much are you spending on that? And eventually you need to be able to manage the risk and compliance of your services as you're starting to shift workloads in-house, public cloud. The entire notion of risk becomes very, very important. So we went through understanding that innovation is crucial for business growth. IT stands in the heart of business growth. However, IT is locked today to maintaining the system. The infrastructure itself is starting to evolve to enable IT to let go of some of the old paradigms and change, and so a new operational model needs to come into play. I'm going to summarize with just a thought. I'm reading a book right now on the origins of the Homo sapiens, how the Homo sapiens came to rule the world. And I was reading it and I was preparing to this lecture. I found it interesting, the relevance. One of the things I found out is Homo sapiens took over humanity, if you will, and killed all other species of mankind, taking over the planet. One of the things that led to that point was the discovery of fire. Up until 300,000 or 400,000 years, depends who you ask, man could not generate fire. And when you think of where man is spending, men and women, I don't want to be politically incorrect, where mankind spend most of its energy, it's on 2 places. One is the digestion system, and the other one is the brain. These are the 2 sources of, 2 consumers of energy that man has. So until fire was invented, man, just much like chimpanzees, used to eat and then sleep for 5-6 hours just to digest all the food, because that was the energy source. That was where most of the energy went for. When fire was discovered, men started cooking food, and digestion went down from 5 hours to an hour a day, give or take. And so a lot of energy got released and started flowing up to the brain, and a few thousand years later, the Homo sapien discovered the word, the ability to use words and to communicate with one another. And from that point on, the path to world domination was very, very brief, considering timeline. So if you think about this, not calling us IT folks Neanderthals or anything like that, but cloud is IT's opportunity to let go of a lot of the energy spent on maintaining and digesting the current systems, let go of that, and move a lot of energy towards innovation, rolling out services, and helping the business grow. Change the mindset from maintenance to growth. And the only way to get there is to change something fundamental in how IT operates today. Adopt the new technology and the approach that needs to come with it. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you so much, Shahar.